If you are young, you've been told many times by older people that social media is rotting your brain. And hey, mental health check and all, they're not wrong. But you've probably also noticed grandpa or mom or some other older relative of yours spending just as much time as you do on YouTube or TikTok. Today, we're going to talk about that because, as it turns out, middle-aged people, Gen Xers and Boomers, are just as vulnerable online to disinformation and conspiracy theories as anyone else. And maybe, just maybe, society should stop obsessing over what young people are doing for once.
Totally understand that. But the problem really, I think, is, okay, let's throw loads of resources at young people. They are our future. But that is then at the detriment of other demographics within the population.
That's Sarah Wilford. She's a professor at De Montfort University's Center for Computing and Social Responsibility. And she says, sure, it's great we care about young people, but it seems to be the only thing that many governments want to focus on. Globally, we're seeing aggressive policies to protect children, with Australia and Indonesia implementing nationwide social media restrictions for minors, and a dozen other countries planning to follow suit. Sarah argues we need to pay attention to older internet users.
What we discovered, and actually I have to say that it is born out of my own frustrations as well, being a sort of older, middle-aged, I'm at the youngest end of Boomer, older end of Gen X. And some of the frustrations that I've noted is that nobody wants to hear us. Nobody wants to talk to us. Nobody wants to listen to what we've got to say. We are seen as boring, a bit steady, but we're also perceived as this homogenous blob of middle-aged people, sort of 45 to 65 sort of age group. And I don't know how you would feel, but if you felt that you were being ignored and that your views and values were no longer relevant, that creates an element of frustration, annoyance. People get fed up. They feel like they've the contract about work hard and be successful has been broken, and nobody wants to listen to them. So this actually makes this particular group really, really vulnerable to the messaging, particularly what I call nostalgia porn, things that say, oh, it was so wonderful when you were young and now it's awful. And this sends people down various rabbit holes where they are actually welcome.
In other words, this is an overlooked demographic, and yet it's also an incredibly relevant group.
They are powerful. They are influential. They are your boss. They are my boss. And yet they are considered to be part of this much, much older group, of which obviously is faintly ridiculous. And what we're doing at the moment, which is the really, really, really worrying thing is, and it's like a political policy blind spot. And they go, okay, let's throw all our resources at young people because we don't want them to be radicalized. But if you don't have resources looking at the middle-aged, who do you think is radicalizing them? Who is making the content? Who is encouraging these people? Well, it's often the middle-aged.
Think about it. Who are some of the biggest social media players out there? Whether it's Elon Musk on X or Joe Rogan with his podcast, many of the biggest players are middle-aged. They not only can drive the online ecosystem, they're also the victims of it.
Because one of the interesting things about this particular group is that they are largely self-taught. They've been online for several decades now, since it all started, but they were not children. They were already adults, and they were largely learning on the hoof, if you like. They were learning by doing. They were learning online. They were learning through work, and they were very much self-taught. So they have not had any of the training, the education, the advice, the understanding of the dangers of being online. And one of the things that came out from our research very, very strongly was this idea, and it came on multiple times. Oh yes, young people really do need to be educated about online safety, etc. Us? No. We've been to the University of Life. We don't need anything. We don't need to be educated. That is a huge danger. So we have people who have not been taught about, some of the manipulation tactics and some of the things that we're actually teaching our young people now. And yet they don't believe that they need that education.
That's a dangerous formula, people who don't know what they don't know. You might call it unknown unknowns, which is different than known unknowns or known knowns. And if you just understood the deep-cut Gen X reference I made, congratulations, you are middle-aged. Look up Donald Rumsfeld, Iraq.
And one of those reasons is because this particular generation is probably the last generation to believe what they see on mainstream media. Even though they go, oh, we can't trust mainstream media, they're still actually consuming a huge amount of mainstream stuff. Right, which means that when you go online, or when they go online and they see, say, a video which is formatted in the way that is familiar and safe looking, it looks like Sky News, or because they set them up so that they look like legitimate news agencies and things like that. So because they don't realize that actually this is a very different thing, it's not regulated, it doesn't have the fact checking, it doesn't have to say the truth, it can say whatever it likes. They look at that and they think, oh, it looks legit. Why shouldn't I believe it? And so they're more likely to be drawn in, whereas younger people go, oh, yeah, that's just another online YouTuber.
That goes against everything we've mostly heard in the global public conversation. But the more you think about it, yeah, Gen Z and Gen Alpha, they grew up with smartphones and they talk about how much they need to unplug all the time, touch grass, right? These two generations are even going retro, buying vinyl, using disposable film cameras, trying to carve out an analog life. Meanwhile, we all have an uncle who believes the earth is flat, or even crazier things I won't get into.
And what we're doing in policy at the moment is assuming the middle-aged are fine. We're going, they're all right. They're nice, steady, boring people. They've done their life stuff and they're working towards middle age until old age and all of that. And they're ignored, but they are just as vulnerable and they do need interventions in the same way.
Okay, so interventions. How can we save middle-aged people from online brain rot?
We are foolish if we think that we can target all our resources at one quite limited demographic whilst ignoring the rest and then expect to have positive results. What is needed, obviously, in my opinion, is policy needs to go, okay, let's look at society as a whole. Who is talking to who is influencing who, all of those sorts of things. Because if we just focus on a tiny proportion of society, well, it almost seems obvious that we're going to miss a huge amount of potential problems and solutions by ignoring this group. Yeah, so they are just as vulnerable, just differently. But what we need is a slightly different approach to the middle-aged. Now, the first problem, of course, is that children, young people, easy to get at school, at university, very easy to find. Older people, they're in the workplace, they're no longer at school, they're very difficult to locate, so they're already hard to reach. And what we're saying is we need to create a discussion reflection space. So when people make counter narratives, as an example, there's a few things that you really don't want to be targeting middle-aged people with: hip hop, funky music, young, good-looking actors, those sorts of things leave the middle-aged cold. They don't, let's have something like an old 1979 Pink Floyd song, We Don't Need No Education, or something that is part of their youth. Remember, in 1979, when that record was released, these people were then in their teens. They were the vulnerable age group that we are now concerned about. So if you want to actually address this group, you need to target interventions directly for them, which means taking the work that we've done to understand where they're coming from, understand that what will turn them off and what will get people to think.
So what do you think? If you are middle-aged, do you think you're extra vulnerable to online disinformation? And what education campaign would appeal to you? If it's not Pink Floyd, maybe it's someone from a few years later, like Madonna, Paula Abdul, Oasis? Sorry if you're feeling old right now, but that makes two of us. I was born in 1980. That's all for now. DW News is giving you the latest and also sharing deep dives on here and across the rest of social media. I'm Melissa Chan. Until next time.